Welcome to Performance Requirements Summary Training. A Performance Requirements Summary is summary of the work elements included in a performance work statement. The Performance Requirements Summary, or PRS, summarizes 4 very important elements for performance-based acquisitions. The 4 important elements of the PRS include performance objectives, the performance standards, the acceptable quality levels, and the methods of contract surveillance. The PRS will ultimately help the government and the contractor know if and when performance objectives have been satisfactorily accomplished. The PRS is the backbone of the requirements documents because it contains all of the requirements' most significant performance data and criteria. The PRS is normally shown in the form of a matrix, which has 4 columns. The first column, performance objectives, are the services needed in order to perform the requirement and are stated in terms of outcomes required. They are the requirement's most important deliverables. The performance objectives will generally consist of the performance objectives identified in the work breakdown structure. You may have written some down previously. If you have them, the performance objectives that you will most likely want to pre-select from your PRS are those Level 2 or Level 3 performance objectives, which are most critical to the requirement's outcome. The performance objectives will generally consist of the performance objectives identified in the work breakdown structure. You may have written some down previously. If you have them, the performance objectives that you will most likely want to pre-select from your PRS are those Level 2 or Level 3 performance objectives, which are most critical to the requirement's outcome. Since the sample requirement I'm using had sub-level performance objectives for each of the preceding Level 2 performance objectives, I will only be pre-selecting Level 3 performance objectives, which are telephone support, software support, hardware support, video teleconference system, overhead projectors, website appearance, uploading documents to website, and answering website queries. Not all the performance objectives in the work breakdown structure should automatically be included in the PRS. The performance objectives in the PRS are the requirement's most important deliverables. These performance objectives will be where the government's quality assurance inspectors will spend the majority of their time conducting their surveillance efforts. As I stated previously, I currently have my Level 3 tasks as the performance objectives in my PRS. However, because the performance objectives in my PRS need to be the most important deliverables in my requirement, I will want to make some changes, and you may too. Telephone, software, and hardware computer support are very important, so I will want to ensure we conduct quality assurance inspections on those. My commander informed our team that when new employees come into the organization, it's been reported that they have been sitting for days not working because their computers are not set up. And he asked us to begin monitoring progress in this area on the next contract, so I will add new user setup as a performance objective. Then, VTC and overhead projectors of themselves are not vital to the overall success of the requirement, but the conference room's functionality as a whole is. Then, we determined that uploading documents to the website isn't worth spending surveillance time on, so we'll remove that. As you can see, it's sometimes necessary to move up or down the work breakdown structure in order to capture the most significant performance objectives for your requirement. Now that we have a solid list of the performance objectives for our PRS, we will create the performance standards. Our PRS's second column is the performance standards. FAR 37.603 states, the standard shall be measurable and structured to permit an assessment of the contractor's performance, which means performance standards need to be stated in terms of quality, accuracy, cost, timeliness, completeness, etc. in order to be measured. The performance standard is the requirement's target level of performance. Performance below this level is considered unacceptable. These standards may be objective, such as answer phone within 5 rings, or this standard can be subjective, such as 99% customer satisfaction. Regardless of the method you choose to measure the contractor's rate of success, the performance standard must provide the ability to measure the contractor's performance against a target standard to determine if and when the performance objective was met. For example, for telephone support, I have every phone call answered within 5 rings is measurable. For software support, I have maintain and update system software and security patches. Is that measurable? Not really, but I'll explain more in this coming up. New user orientation setup has configure, train, and administer new users' applications within 3 days from notice of arrival. Within 3 days is measurable. Hardware support says, replace parts and repair computers within 5 business days from receipt of part or notice of malfunction. Within 5 days is measurable. Conference room support, ensure conference room AV equipment is functional. Repair, replace as required. Respond to errors during normal duty hours within 15 minutes. Is measurable. The Website Appearance Performance Standard says, website should always be fully functional. Always is measurable. Maybe not attainable, but measurable. And for answering website queries, we have, query should receive response within 24 hours of submission. Within 24 hours is measurable. Remember those one-sentence statements we wrote in step 4 of the work breakdown structure exercise that describe the desired result of the performance objectives? I just used those here to compose my performance standards, and you may too. Just remember that each performance standard must have a measurable objective against which actual performance can be compared. So you might need to add some numbers or quality measurements when composing and reviewing your performance standards. The government, including the Corps, will use these performance standards to assess the contractor's performance during actual contract performance. Performance standards do not necessarily need to be complex or long. It's generally suggested performance standards be 1 sentence or 2 phrases long, maximum. But it's more important that they sufficiently describe when the contractor has met the performance target. The third column is acceptable quality levels. Acceptable quality levels, or AQLs, are the degree which the contractor may deviate from the performance standard and still be in compliance with the contract. Said another way, how much will you allow the contractor to mess up? Acceptable quality levels are generally stated in terms of percentages of conformance, such as 92% compliance, or in terms of allowable deviations, such as no more than 2 deviations per month. The more mission-critical the performance objective, the higher the AQL's percentage of conformance and/or the lower the number of allowable deviations. For example, phone calls will be answered within 5 rings should be an easy task and not very mission-critical, so we stated that the contractor should make no more than 3 errors per month. Software support is more mission-critical because it affects all of the computers on the network and involves security issues. So if you remember, we didn't quantify or assign numbers to this performance standard. Well, we are compensating for the lack of performance standard specificity in the AQLs by assigning a 100% compliance and attaching a 0 security incident threshold because of its critical nature. On new user orientation, new users must be set up on their computers within 3 days from the notice of arrival, 99% of the time. Again, not too critical, but it has the commander's attention, so naturally it has an increased level of importance. As a side note, when you're thinking of how to measure compliance, pay attention to the number of personnel being supported by the performance objective. Whether an organization has 30 users, 3,000 users, or 30,000 will determine how many individuals will not be set up on their computers within 3 days with the contractor still remaining in compliance with their contract. To drive home this point about paying attention to the scope of support required, let's say there's a requirement for server operation and maintenance service, which operates and maintains the computer network for the entire installation. This requirement of high criticality requires a higher AQL of 99%. The reason why the AQL can't be 100% uptime is because servers occasionally have to go down for maintenance. This makes 100% uptime impossible. So 99% sounds like the next highest possible standard, right? But what exactly does an uptime of 99% mean in this scenario? To find this out, we determine that there are 8,765.81 hours over the course of a year, and 99% uptime would equal 8,678.15 uptime hours. When we do the arithmetic, we find that establishing an AQL of 99% allows the contractor to have 87.66 hours of downtime and still be compliant with the performance standard. Theoretically then, the servers could be down for over 3 consecutive days, and the contractor would still meet the performance standard in AQL. Can you imagine your commander being accepting of the servers going down for 3 days in a row? So, for requirements with higher mission-critical services, you want to invest more time to smartly condition AQLs. One way of positioning this AQL might be something like 99% uptime with no more than 1 hour of consecutive downtime. Then, if we have more conditions, such as software maintenance or system upgrades, that need to be addressed, we can say something like, software maintenance and system upgrades shall be performed on the weekends or after normal duty hours, and elaborate more about that within the PWS. Please remember these 3 things about acceptable quality levels. AQL should be measurable and achievable. They should challenge the contractor to achieve higher levels of performance, and the contracting officer representative will be measuring and holding the contractor accountable to achieve these levels of contract performance. Assuming you understand the point of AQLs, I'm going to complete the remaining acceptable quality levels. The 4th and final column in our performance requirement summary is our method of performance assessment, or surveillance methods. Before composing a PWS, or QASP, It's highly advisable to predetermine the method of surveillance, which you will use for each of the requirement's performance objectives. The 5 of the most common and effective surveillance methods are planned sampling, random sampling, 100% inspection, customer feedback, and contractor metrics. Planned sampling. Planned sampling are inspections scheduled at specific intervals to assess the contractor performance. This sampling method is beneficial when the Corps or other government inspectors can target specific areas that require contract compliance. Random sampling is a surveillance method where the Corps or other government inspector randomly inspects a certain technical area or a specific number of deliverables to ensure they conform to the established quality standards. Random sampling is preferred for projects with a large scope or a large number of recurring deliverables. Additionally, because random sampling presents the element of surprise, the contractor must always be prepared for an inspection on all deliverables during contract performance. This can help motivate the contractor to attain a high level of performance. 100% inspection. Just as the title suggests, 100% of all the contractor's deliverables are inspected. Because 100% inspection is labor-intensive and time-consuming for Corps or other government inspectors, 100% inspection should only be used when the most stringent performance thresholds must be achieved. Customer feedback. It is used primarily for contracts where high levels of customer satisfaction are important to measure the contractor's successful performance, or it can be used as a supplementary method of surveillance for when government inspectors are unable to observe performance. With this method of surveillance, the end user provides feedback, and if that feedback is negative, the Corps or contracting officer investigates the negatively reported work elements. If the suspected negatively reported work element is justified, the non-conforming work element may be handled accordingly and documented in the contractor's performance assessment report. Contractor metrics. It's the 5th and least utilized method of contract surveillance, and it's also the most complex and difficult to successfully execute. That's because the contractor metrics method allows the contractors to monitor, assess, and report their own performance. This surveillance method is generally used when the government seeks to reduce, but not eliminate, the government's level of quality assurance oversight and thereby transfer quality assurance oversight responsibilities to the contractor. FAR 46.105 states, the contractor is responsible for performing all inspections and tests required by the contract, except those specifically reserved for performance by the government. It's under this authority that the government may choose to utilize the contractor's internal quality control techniques as a surveillance method. When using this method of surveillance, the contracting officer may choose to reduce the government's level of oversight if the contractor established a reputation of thoroughness, accuracy, and responsibility during the contract's period of performance. This quality assurance surveillance method should only be used with contractors who maintain high levels of trust with the government, when performance risk is low, and/or when the contractor's reputation is above reproach.